Thank you, everyone, and welcome to this first in our 2023 series of supporting Surrey delegation skills for lawyers with Nicola Jones from Athena Professional. And you can also see on the slides our upcoming talks in the supporting Surrey series, including commercial awareness and business development, and then legal project management. And as for today's, so as in this first one on focusing on business skills, that we have some housekeeping. So should you like to ask a question, please wait until invited by Nicola, which you can do within the chat, or unmute yourself, have to show your camera, and do this intermittently throughout the session. And I see Nicola in the chat has asked, do let her know where you work and what your role is, so which I will be happy to do once I've finished going through the preliminaries. And yes, and you should all have got the notification saying this session will be recorded and made available to members after the event. And do keep an eye out for future supporting Surrey events, but rather than go on too much more about the session and Nicola, I do invite Nicola to start talking.
I can do that. Never a problem for me to start talking. Lovely to see you, Amber. Thanks for having your camera on. It makes a difference. I know there's somebody out there. I know there are other people out there too. And if you fancy putting your camera on, that will be delightful. We can have a conversation, because as far as I'm concerned, delegation is really about mindset, and it's about how you approach it, as much as what the actual task involved in. It's not intellectually difficult, it's practically difficult. So let me just share a slide or two with you. I hope we're not going to do death by PowerPoint. It will depend how engaged you want to be and how conversational you fancy being. But our topic today is delegation. How do we do that? And it is an art. It's something that requires both a practical approach and an approach that suits you personally. So that might be different for some of you than it is for others. So we're just going to run a little poll, actually. Having said I'm going to do one thing, I'm going to do another. Let's just launch that poll now. So I've just launched a poll. Can you see it, Amber? Because you're my only representative of humanity out there. Can you see the poll? I'm going to relaunch it. Let me just see if that works. Can you see it now? Bingo. Thank you very much. So how do you feel about delegation? I'm just going to mute everyone for now because I can hear some background noise from someone. But you're all welcome, and I give you absolute permission to come off mute at any point and shout at me or ask a question or otherwise get involved. So we've got 6 responses so far, and so okay. On call. Just see if we can get that number up to 10 so that we've got a little bit more representation of everyone on the call. We may have a late burst of activity which causes us to tip over into double figures. Wouldn't it be nice? Lovely. Okay, so that's interesting. I'm just going to share the results I've got with you so far. So you'll see there that most people on the call need to do it more effectively or more often. No surprises there. And somebody's on the call because they haven't yet needed to get to delegate, but they're smart enough to think that they'll find out how to do it before the time comes. So good for you. And thank you for those of you who shared in chat who you are and what you're up to. We've got a couple of residential property solicitors on the call. It'd be useful to know what other people are up to. Partly also it helps the tone in the room. You know who you're in a room with. I always think that's nice to know, isn't it? We like to know what company we're keeping. So the general mood is, we know about this delegation thing, but we're not entirely sure that we could be doing it better. Why listen to me about this? Well, I'm a former barrister. 22 years ago now, I got involved in learning and development, became director of legal skills training at the University of Warwick School of Law. Did that for some time before setting out on my own. And I have since that point, I say, and here I blush to the roots, I've won the Association for Business Psychology's National Award numerous times, and I was quite pleased last year because I won it, and in other categories, Arup won and Nationwide won, and then in the category for learning and development, it was little old me. So just to let you know about that, because it's not the case that I merely think I'm a legend in my own lunchtime. Other people seem to think I might be as well. So that's a little bit. I work a lot with subject matter experts on human skills for a digital age. That's my agenda. I'm interested in helping you to be the best you can be as you face into the digital transformation and what that's going to mean for the legal sector. And at heart, I'm just an old-fashioned legal aid lawyer who happens to think that the law matters and that it matters to us in all ways, individually and collectively. So I'm rather interested in it continuing to be a robust source of social structure. There we are. That's me. So question, why delegate? That's our opening question. And then we're going to think about why people don't do it, when it's appropriate, and how to do it. That's what we're going to do. And then we'll have questions at the end. But as I say, if you have any questions as we go along, please do ask them. So this is a kind of 20th century idea of delegation, isn't it? This is the hierarchical, do what I say, do it right now, and get shouted at in the process. And that's the mood breaker. That's the person who's not seeing to whom they are speaking, merely seeing tasks that need to be done, and is doing the old hierarchical thing. I'm just moving on to a different slide because that's much calmer and I prefer looking at that. And the point being that in the 21st century, in a knowledge economy, the idea of delegation takes on a different complexion. So if we think about the way that we did law in the 80s and 90s, when I first worked in law firms in various different guises, it was a very hierarchical situation, and the delegation process was quite formalized. And people looked after entire files and entire client workloads. That's less the case now, and it's going to become increasingly less the case. So now we commoditize things, we break them down, we have systems that help us manage cases, and increasingly we're going to have document automation. That means that we'll have transparency about where a case is at any given point, and we'll be able to see what's been drafted in relation to that and where the work effort is. I'm just going to ask in chat, is anybody actually using, give me a 1 in chat if you're using document automation already.
Just to unmute myself, Nicola, that how would you define document automation? Because I imagine for some people they would like specifics. They might be using document automation already, but not be quite aware whether what they're doing is document automation. So would you please give some examples?
Well, this would be the situation in which, when you're say you're drafting a document and you're able to work concurrently on it. With other people, you've got real-time drafting capability. Amber can do that. She's doing it already. Janine can't. Thank you for responding. Martin can. And then you're passing that document. The document is not coming through email. You're not sending it backwards and forwards to each other. It's in a central location. You're working on it. You're coming away. Somebody else is working on it. They're coming away. And you have that process set up. Okay, so we've got some representation of some people who do and some people who don't. It makes a difference, doesn't it, to the nature of delegation, if actually what you're doing is working on something in real time. You're not passing a baton on, you're collaborating in that sense. So it's a different mindset and a different approach to that kind of hierarchical 20th century piece. And I think it's worth noticing that and noticing what that means, particularly for those who are more junior, who may have historically had a much more process-driven approach to the way they learned. And they'd have done stuff with, had it red penned and so forth. Whereas now, for working on screen, the quality of the experience is different, and we have to adjust our approach and our capacity to enable others accordingly. So why do we delegate? Well, there's some pretty obvious answers, aren't there? I'm sure you could come up with them if you were required to right now, but we want to increase productivity and efficiency. That's the holy grail, isn't it? Increasingly, as we move towards fixed pricing, then we need to think about how we work more and more efficiently, because if we're giving the client a price, then we need to be able to do that work in a timely way and avoid writing off time. So we're moving from a situation where the billable hour means that we want things to take time. And when I first started off in business on my own, I can remember doing a session for a group down something like Milton Keynes or something, and somebody saying, but what happens if I don't spend time drafting? How do I charge the client? And that would have been in the early noughties that conversation was had. Now we're in a very different situation where we can see that actually we're moving towards a situation where fixed pricing is a reality, and we need to have this capability to work efficiently. It's part of this new and emerging business model. We need to be able to develop and empower our colleagues. And so we're all playing a bigger role in the case effort, in the client work effort. And we need to bring people through in that. And I'm sure it's something that's uppermost in your minds, because of course, we have a big problem with staff retention and recruitment right now. And that sense that people are being able to contribute meaningfully to work and experience challenging work, but also having the support they need to do that work comfortably and effectively, that's really important. So that business of developing and empowering is really important. And it also allows our managers and our fee earners to work on strategic stuff. So what we want to do is have the highly paid people taking a more strategic approach to the work than they might otherwise be able to do if they're not delegating. So there are lots of benefits to delegation. I'm just interested to know what your experience is. So I'm going to invite you either come off chat or come off mute and tell me, or in chat, what happens for you when you delegate? What's the benefit for you? Could be really literal. It could be something that has an impact on your sense of yourself. Anybody want to offer anything up?
Well, I guess for me, it can be helpful to delegate administrative work, so that that isn't chargeable, so then I can focus on fee earning work. Yeah. But also by the same token, I think it can be useful for people I'm delegating to, or perhaps the other side of the coin. But for example, when sending estimates, that with colleagues that now tend to, if we've done an estimate before, or recently that I haven't delegated it yet and it's new, that I'll forward the email to them, perhaps with some comments. So for their education about this, how you go about structuring this estimate and retained letter for this particular piece of work. So that people are actually being developed and hopefully learning along the way.
Okay, so they're giving you a starting point. You're saying, look, take a look at this. What do you think? And then you work on it together.
As in, not quite that, in terms of providing them a precedent to work from, but all so often it'll be that when delegating, for example, estimates, I might send. I'll do the sort of first one in a particular area of work myself, but then forward the email to my legal assistant colleagues, so that they have a good idea of how to do it for me in future, and then rely on them for future ones, along with occasional comments to benefit education, since we're planning to make them trainee solicitors.
That's a really nice example. Thanks, Martin. Any other impact of the benefits of delegation? Amber, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I would say that it helps me sort of be across more things, so I can be, for clients, they can see that I'm doing things and it's ticking along, even if it's not got my direct attention to it.
Got you.
Which is not possible all the time. So it's really helpful.
Yeah, I like that. Across more things. It's a really nice way of saying it. And Elizabeth in chat is saying that she loves getting rid of admin tasks, just like you, Martin. And it also helps bring on as many levels. Yeah, bring people on is the other big benefit. So yeah, as Amber says, it allows that focus, that more strategic thinking. Hopefully it increases productivity. You know, as Martin's kind of alluded to that, because he's freeing up his time to focus on other things, but also somebody else is doing the work in an efficient way. Some of the kind of added value that one doesn't necessarily identify in the moment is around communication and collaboration. I already mentioned the value of that. Sometimes that can come across as being part of the headache of delegation. You know, like you've got to take the time to explain, you've got to be present for somebody whilst they make the effort. But actually, if you can reframe that as an opportunity to be a role model, to articulate and give clarity of purpose, you're helping and enabling other people to communicate openly and positively. That's really important. That's a really important reflection of culture, which essentially boils down to the question, how do we do things around here? And if we do things around here in a way that is measured and thoughtful and positive, then delegation can become a really important element of that manifestation of what your business stands for. It also helps people to be involved in decision-making processes. So when they're quite junior, they're able to be part of seeing how decisions are made and how the work progresses. And that's a really valuable opportunity as well. And also, of course, more and more in this age, we talk about the value of diversity and the importance of inclusion, because if we recruit for sameness and we have views that are all similar in the room, we don't get any different perspective. And that's more and more going to be important as we move into a time where we're trying to relate more deeply to clients and more widely to clients and communicate that through digital means. And it also empowers the team members because they're getting this challenge. So in Martin's example, he's giving them a precedent and giving them the challenge of writing the estimate. And that's empowering for the individual. It increases that sense of trust, and it helps them see that you're investing in them as well as gaining the efficiency for the overall work effort. And we've already mentioned the opportunities for learning and growth in different ways, but it's really valuable, and quite often we underplay the learning piece that's going on in a competency-based approach. Of course, it's one of the things the SRA will say indicates competence is the capacity to manage others. And the capacity to manage workload. So if there were to, the way the regime works at the moment, I'm sure it's written on all your hearts, which is that when you sign off for your practicing certificate, you're saying you're competent. And that's the case that you're saying that you can meet the SRA's competency statement standard or an indication thereof. So thinking about how you do tasks like delegation is a really good example of some reflective learning. This session is really valuable from that perspective. Thinking about how you delegate, thinking about the benefits in the round and being able to articulate that, it's a gift of competency. And also, and we've mentioned this already, retention. If you want people to be engaged and committed to your business, then you need to give them these opportunities. So there are lots of benefits to delegation, and in the explanation there, I think you can hear that that's a pretty compelling business case, isn't it, for being able to do this well. And it really goes to the heart of your capability as a business at all levels. And I very much commend to you the idea of thinking of it in this period of transition. So we're not just practicing the law that we've always, in the way that we've always practiced it, or if we are, we know that something else is coming, because I'm quite clear that that's absolutely the case, that there will be a transformation in the legal profession in the next 10 years. And it may not come all at once, but it will come incrementally over the next 10 years. And practice, if we were to meet here in 10 years' time, I think your practice could look quite different. I say that the week before ChatGPT 4 is launched. We can't have a session without mentioning ChatGPT, can we? But I've been in conversation with in-house counsel lately. Conversation is, do lawyers survive? The obvious answer at the moment is yes. But the likes of Suskind and Mark Cohen are saying, yes, and they need to be the humans in the loop. Yes, and we need to know how this works. And there will need to be intermediary platforms that make this generative AI speak to us. So putting in the mix there, the fact that you're not just working for today, although heaven knows that's enough pressure. you're also working in ways that set you up to work in the future. So if it's all such a brilliant idea, how come people don't do it? How come people tend to find delegation such a challenge? Does anybody want to tell me in chat or come off mute and tell me, well, what's so difficult about delegation? Why don't we do it? Or do it because nearly everybody said you could do it more often or more effectively. So why doesn't it get the attention that it might deserve?
I see in the chat that Janine has already anticipated this and given a response.
Part of my capability is my inability to let go of the need to control. That's very honest and absolutely on point. Thank you. And Lucy says she said it in a direct message to me, but I hope you don't mind me telling everyone, Lucy. I'm just going to give you a moment to come off mute and scream at me if you don't mind me telling everyone, if you do mind me telling everyone. But she says initially it takes time to explain. And it can feel like it's taking a while longer than it would be to do it myself. Thank you again, super honest, and thanks for saying it's okay to share. And Elizabeth says she agrees with Janine. Amber, were you going to offer anything different? Because I noticed you came off mute. No. So this is the business, isn't it, of actually needing to be in control, and that's what this slide is about. This slide is saying, I'm Superwoman here, and I can hold on to all of this, and I don't really need to let go. And this is absolutely the heart of the dilemma of delegation. And it's something that we have to acknowledge, that we are letting go. We're letting go of something. And if you can frame that in your mind as a positive asset to your professional practice, that's going to make a difference. Now, depends, doesn't it? What's the quality of experience you have? When you let go, what happens? And I would commend to you, if you want to notice what happens and you want some evidence of what happens when you delegate, well, do that. We're all lawyers. We know what evidence is. Let's have some kind of, just keep a note of what happens when you delegate, not what happens to your colleague to whom you delegated, but what happens to you. What works when you delegate for you? And what gets in the way? And what stops you? And start noticing that. And the noticing could be it's very, very granular. It could be a physical sensation. And start noticing that and coming up with strategies for overcoming it. And allowing yourself to see if indeed there is evidence of success when you do delegate, because that's the thing that will help you delegate again next time. It's the sort of thing you would be pointing your colleagues towards if you wanted them to understand that they are making progress and doing well. It's worth reflecting on. And Janine makes the point, it takes too long to explain and train, difficult to delegate when I am dedicated home worker. Takes copious verbose emails. Really good point, Janine. So the issue around communication when we're working in a hybrid way takes on a different complexion. And let's park that question of hybrid work and come back to that, because I think it's going to be a useful one to use as an illustration in due course. So thank you for offering that. So yeah, the control factor and understanding what's happening for you in your mindset. That's really important. And the other one is the overwhelm factor. And several people have mentioned this. I'm just too busy to delegate. I've just got to do it myself. And when is that taking time? When is the pain happening there? I would suggest to you the pain is being deferred. So you're sacrificing your own time, your own emotional and cognitive effort right now in return for the quick win. And you're also preserving your mantle of overwhelm. And that's a difficult thing to drop as well, isn't it? Here we are in this, still in pandemic. You know, we like to think we're post-pandemic, but we still have COVID as part of our lives. We know that we're at risk all the time. And we live in a more liable state now, don't we? We know that we are potentially going to have an experience like that of some kind, or some other existential threat is going to come and visit itself upon us. So we kind of are comfortable. So many of us have become comfortable with our sense of overwhelm. We don't want it, we say, but actually we hold on to it. So that's something to address too. So when we're in that sense of overwhelm, what's in it for us? What's making us stay there? You might say, well, it's sheer force of work. Shut up, Nicola. I don't appreciate being told that I could drop this. I can't drop it. It's too much. And ultimately, there are ultimate questions to be asked about that. Are you going to be at work forever? Are you completely indispensable? What would happen if you got COVID? How sustainable is your work practice? And really where we want to be is in this place where our work practice is sustainable. That means giving something to others. So there are compelling reasons why that needs to happen. I'm just going to let Claire in because she's just come into the waiting room. Okay, so now we're going to shift a little bit and ask the question, well, when is it the right approach to delegate? So sometimes it's not the right thing to do. I'm just going to give you a way of thinking about this, which is about thinking of the difference between this directive approach along the bottom, which is the telling, you know, that first slide with the guy shouting at everyone. So the directive approach and the enabling approach on the other axis. So if we think about where we start there, if we're on a highly directive and a low enabling approach, we are literally telling, and this is going to be very task driven, isn't it? It's going to be the admin stuff. Can you complete this? Can you do that? And we're not giving, we are keeping our own authority, and we're not really interested in enabling the other person to do anything other than complete a task. Then we've got a kind of mentoring approach. So this is where we are offering guidance and doing some telling, but we are also trying to do some enabling. We might make some suggestion. We might provide some feedback. We want to be the source of authority. We're holding on to the authority, but we are offering up an opportunity. If we were to take a coaching approach, we wouldn't be directive at all. We'd be highly enabling, or we'd be very low on directive. And we would be saying things like, well, how would you do this? What do you need in order to do this? How can I help you? And when those questions are asked, you can hear that the person who's got to do the thinking and the work in terms of answering those questions is the person being spoken to, the person being delegated to. So the person who's doing the delegation is not doing the work of the thinking there. They are taking a coaching approach. And then finally, we've got to the delegating approach, which is where you are letting go of your authority. See earlier conversation about keeping control. And you are, you're not necessarily being desperately enabling, because you are saying to this person, you do it. Here's the authority. This is what you need. This is what I want you to do. And I'm letting go of the task. So the reality is that we tend to move people around this model, don't we? We would start with inexperienced people. We'd be very directive, and then we might start to mentor them a bit. We might shift around this as we go. Does this resonate with you? I've got two people on camera who can nod at me or not, but they are nodding, so that's comforting. Okay, so I'm just noticing that Elizabeth's put something in chat here. She says, systems and standard letters and file management make it easier, but we have to overcome centuries of doing it my way and not being at the mercy of the computer. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That habitual practice. I actually have quite a lot of compassion and regard for people who have a way of doing things that's always worked for them. And I think it can be quite crushing to say to people, you've got to just stop doing the things the way that have always worked for you. There's those people probably extremely successful and people that we really want to hold in positive regard. And there is a question about, I think it's useful to frame this as legacy, Elizabeth. It's useful to say, how do you want to leave your legacy here? How do you want to be seen? and how do you want to enable other people? And then I think that's a nice way of approaching the problem of people who don't want to let go of habitual practice, because it kind of holds up the mirror to the way they're behaving, but in a quite a gentle way that works with the ego quite nicely. Amber.
On these, just sort of to explain why I'm here and what I'm sort of hoping to get out of it, I would say that I definitely fluctuate on this spectrum, but it's not just the way that I want to communicate, it's how they want to receive it. So actually, do they want me to mentor? Do they want me to coach? How much input should I be giving? And I think most of the time I get it right, but on occasion, there's been times when I've been directive when I should have been mentoring and given them a bit more room to sort of make their own decisions. So it's trying to know when to flex to each one, basically.
And there are layers to that, aren't there? So that there is I'm sure, Amber, sometimes it's the case that you've just got to be directive because you haven't got time to be anything else.
Yeah.
And the question is, does that come with an explanation? Look, you know, I'd love to talk you through this. Right now, we've got a court deadline or whatever it is, or a completion deadline or whatever it is, and I just need you to do this. And it's taking the 10 seconds that it's taken to contextualize your directive approach, as opposed to just telling them to do it. The other question about that might be at play there when you're moving from one to the other is your sense of their capability. So if they made a mess of the last effort, are you likely to be shifting them around, or are you going to want to see more evidence? And then again, it's a question of being honest about where they are and saying, and being really clear and asking them what they need in order to take on the task with more independence next time. And I think I can sort of slightly hear two other things going on behind this. One is the fact of hybrid working, which makes these things more complicated sometimes. And then it's a question of having the conversation online and not doing everything by written medium, because written medium has no intonation, does it? It's got no nuance, and heaven knows this medium has little enough nuance. So we have to work really hard in this medium to bring things to life. I'm channeling my inner Judi Dench a little bit right now. Okay, I do want to be Judy when I grow up, but it's that thing about being over communicating online, because actually otherwise we're not heard. And one thing that people don't do online is smile, because we think we're still on our own in our room and we don't have a reason to smile. I think that's my only rationale. But yeah, so I'm not suggesting you don't smile online, but you smile a lot, and I'm really grateful for it. But I'm talking about the quality of communication online and trying to make that connection with people and stay in rapport with them.
Yeah, thank you. I think that hits the nail on the head.
There was one other thing that I was hearing in what you said, and that was also, I was going to say, is a slightly taking into account the fact that we have a generation of associates and also our newly qualified and trainees coming through who have been profoundly affected by lockdown. And that has effect, I think, on their ballast, is the term I'm using at the moment. So those of us who are 103 and have been and seen and had something to take into pandemic that meant that we felt that we could navigate this reasonably well. We have more to draw on, whereas I think there is a generation of people in the business now who have less to draw on. I think that's important to acknowledge. It doesn't make them less capable in the long run. It means that they've had a different life experience to many of us at a crucial developmental stage. So there is a cost to that, and that's probably having to stay in a mentoring coaching position for a little bit longer than you might want to. But again, that's about having the conversation, because the other feature is that there can be a tendency to think that we can run before we can walk, and that I think is, again, just saying it. You know, you're good at this, you're good at that, and I think you need to work on the other. This is going to be okay. And that offering challenge and reassurance. Thanks for the question. It's a really great one, Amber. So if this was Sam, and Sam's our associate, and we're going to deploy Sam to do some work. I want to think about where we're going to put Sam on this grid. If Sam were somebody who was a trainee and you needed them to let's say draft their first estimate, because Martin gave me that example already, I think we're probably all pretty certain, aren't we? We'd be pretty directive about that. And we'd ask them to do it according to the precedent, and we'd keep a very close eye, and we'd be doing lots of monitoring, lots of progress updates, and making sure that we're across the final result. And then I think we'd find that as Sam became more mature in the business, we would obviously be taking them through a mentoring and coaching process. What is it that you would need to see? And maybe you want to tell me in chat or come off mute. What would you need to see from a colleague before you felt comfortable delegating to them?
I must say, if it was a bit of an, maybe I'm thinking about it the wrong way, but when I'm delegating to someone, I guess if in the example of an estimate, I'm not necessarily expecting anything in particular, though I see Amber's mentioned willingness to get it wrong and ask for help, flag it, which seems a good point. But in terms of an estimate, I would say very much I guess nothing more than to have a go, do their best at it, and if there are any issues, then we can discuss it and help with their education.
So there's an element of humility in what you're both, what Amber said online and what you said there, Martin. You want your colleague to demonstrate humility and know when they don't know, and know when it's time to seek help. That's a huge part of your quality assurance process, isn't it? You don't want people dragging work off into a corner and not sharing it. And what does that mean for you? Would be my next question, because are you somebody who's able to demonstrate humility? Do you always get it right? Do you sometimes need to acknowledge that there's more to do? Because people can only behave in ways that they see modeled to them. So that capability, the willingness to be vulnerable enough to say, I've made a mistake, or something hasn't gone right, or this is something I could have done better. So that taking the time to do the reflective piece when you've completed work, and to say, well, what worked here and what didn't work. Somebody says, Janine says, regularly gives examples on what she's stuffed up. Yeah, and what didn't, and that's brilliant learning, isn't it? That is the nature of learning. I think sometimes as lawyers, because we tend to be highly educated and probably very successful academically, we tend to think that perfect is the best example to give. But actually, Janine's articulating there the value of sharing, the fact that it only ever gets harder, doesn't it? It doesn't ever get easier. The work just gets more complex and there gets to be more of it. So I think sharing that sense of the capacity to learn is something that's really, really important. So that, yeah, the question that I'd ask is, what do you need to, I had asked is that what do you need to see in a colleague? I'm guessing you want to see capability, real evidence of capability, before you're going to just let go of the control. And the question is, have you given yourself the opportunity to build up that sense of evidence with that person, or are you just going in at the deep end? And putting them under a lot of pressure, and maybe they'll work, maybe it'll work, and maybe it won't. Lucy says she's got a colleague to whom she delegates who's really hard on themselves, and when they get things wrong, and how do you manage that? Great question, Lucy. How do you manage the fact that somebody is taking things very much to heart? The dangerous word there is I can hear myself wanting to say it is, well, you shouldn't feel like that. And that's dangerous, because it's telling them the way they should feel, and they patently don't feel that way. So I think a compassionate response, one that acknowledges and notices how they're feeling, one that that connects to it kindly and says, that must be hard for you. It must make you feel, or invite them to say how it makes them feel, but it must make them feel bad. And also to notice then that this is a common experience, that they are not the only ones that have ever felt like this. What they're experiencing in that moment, whatever sense of distress or failure they might be experiencing, is an experience that every human being has been through, and every human being to come will go through. So there's a common humanity in what's happening for them. And that's the most immediate and compassionate response. And then the next question, I think, is to ask them what it is that they want to achieve, how they want to be. And then invite them to think how they can get from where they are to where they want to be, and get them to do the thinking. So what I'm advising you here, Lucy, is a coaching approach, but doing it in a very gentle way that enables them to understand that and hear that you've accepted and appreciated their distress. And now you're going to do something constructive with it and help them move from where they are to somewhere else. I hope that's a useful response, Lucy. Elizabeth says, willingness to have a go under supervision, and then you can gauge their capability. Absolutely. And so we'd be in that mentoring and coaching space there, Lucy, Elizabeth, I think, helping you and them, shared conversation about what it is that's working. Yeah, home working. There's a question here being asked about home working. I'm not quite clear what it is right now. Maybe someone can put in the in chat what the whether there's a question there. That would be helpful. Okay, so I hope that's useful to help you think about when is delegation appropriate, and what is it that you can do. So question to ask here is how to do it effectively, because that's what many of you are saying you want to achieve, is how do I do it effectively? And in a sense, I'm just going to share a different graphic with you that's going to be shared, come out to you as a handout, and you'll have this, but it's not rocket science. It's like many of these skills, these core human skills. It's not difficult in the process. Nothing here is going to be a challenge to you intellectually to understand, is it? But taking a structured approach, that can be quite difficult, particularly under pressure of time. So if it all sounds like, here, get that off my table, off my desk, take it away, that leaves somebody with overwhelm. You're giving some of your overwhelm to someone else, and that's not really great, is it? So taking a structured approach and making sure that people have what they need at each stage, that's really important. And also thinking about what the process is asking of you and of them at each stage is really important too, because we've acknowledged, haven't we, that most people on this call feel they could do it better or differently. And that's probably because nobody's really ever talked you through how it happens effectively, but also because you perhaps do it in a slightly haphazard way anyway, because you're under so much pressure of time. So it tends not to follow a particular pathway. And I think it's useful, and I say this as somebody who can play academic top trumps with most people. This stuff is not intellectually difficult, but it's hard in practice. And the reason it's hard in practice is it asks something of us, and that's about our own behavior. And we aren't automatons. We are connecting with another person when it comes to delegation. So we have to see and acknowledge them, and also understand what's happening for us in the same process. And that's going to be increasingly important as well, because we need that sense of connection to the work effort, that human connection, because we're sort of referring a little bit to what happens online and what happens when we're working in a hybrid way. Well, when we're working in a hybrid way, the human connection becomes even more important. And the quality of the relationship and the quality of the rapport becomes highlighted. And if what happens is it all gets quite reductive and it all gets very text-driven, then we're losing our own mutual understanding, and we're devaluing the shared effort. And holding on to that sense of shared effort is really challenging when we feel dislocated. Okay, so I've come up to my 45 minutes. That's me. And I'd be very happy to hear from you in the future if that's what you would like to do. Do get in touch. Have you got any questions at this stage? I'll just stop sharing for now.
To start with, I think it might be helpful to talk about timescales when it comes to delegation, since that can be such an important part of it. And possibly approaching this quite vaguely, but any tips on approaching timescales with people you're delegating to, apart from make sure you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is about setting expectation, isn't it, Martin, and being clear about what deadlines there are. Not just the deadline, though. I think it depends on the nature of the task. If it's a big task, then you need milestones. You need to understand when you're going to monitor progress and when you're going to check in. And you need to know when your colleague has permission to seek feedback as well. So there needs to be a sense that you're not just divesting yourself of the task, unless you genuinely are, unless you're giving it to a salaried partner and you expect them to just do it. But even so, I think they need to know that you are available. So I think in terms of timescale clarity, that's the answer to that, knowing where people stand. I think also giving people permission to check in, permission to ask questions. And then I think also acknowledging for yourself that if somebody does come back to you and you think, why are you coming back to me about this already? Or why are you asking me this? You should know this. Then the thing that you can do is not provide an answer. And that's quite a powerful thing to do. So when somebody comes to you to whom you've delegated and says, well, I'm not sure, make sure that you ask them what it is they intend to do and what they're trying to achieve, and help them do the thinking. Sometimes a quick response is, of course, appropriate, but other times, rather than supplying a quick answer, supply a little bit of challenge and say, well, what's your opinion? What would you do if I wasn't here? What is your intention? And get them to do the thinking first before you give them the support of an answer.
Thank you, Nicola. I see Amber has a question in the chat.
Yeah, and Elizabeth's come onto camera, which is exciting because I haven't seen you before, Elizabeth. Who's going first? Amber, are you going to go first? No, Elizabeth, you're in.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I've just remembered the camera goes away and it disappears. You have to go and get it, go and fetch it and pop it up. However, you did not want to see me slurping a cup of tea. We have a number of people here who are our department assistants, which is a better name for secretaries because they do so much more than that. And many of them have law degrees, and so many of us solicitors don't. And they are they've come in with a view to working our way up, and we've got lots and lots of them like that, and they do really well. But we do have the other, I suppose, more old-fashioned type of assistant, secretary, that sort of thing, for whom they don't have that sort of intellectual desire, possibly capabilities, but certainly they don't have that ambition, and they're more happy with what they're doing. And the problem is, I think sometimes, whereas you can sometimes delegate, for me in private client, I can say, have a go at this or that. Have a go at sorting out a draft document, change of trustees or whatever it happens to be. You can't do that with other people, and you have to work out your way of operating. And occasionally we rearrange the deck chairs. And so that every few years, because when people go part-time or leave or become more full-time, we have to match the times, the time that people work, and so we change it. So you have to learn a slightly new way of working when you get your new assistant, or they get a new fee earner. I mean, it does cut both ways. And I also think that in our particular area, which is private client, we're paper heavy, not only because our clients may be the slightly older demographic and not so tech savvy, but also because you have wet signatures on everything and send them off in an envelope with a letter. Whereas many other of the departments are far more computer and online based. And I therefore think that we have a problem in such a department with hybrid working or with almost entirely working at home. We have a choice. We're really fortunate here. And I come into the office every day because I like the separation and I work better like that. But an awful lot of my colleagues at every level prefer to spend 2 or 3 days at home or even more. And I do think it doesn't help, and it increases isolation, and it doesn't help your knowledge of your colleagues, and it doesn't help the delegation either. Really, it doesn't help the supervision. So, you know, to get people on the path. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, I do. I mean, I suggest my own view is that hybrid is hugely valuable, and the flexibility is really valuable.
Oh, it's here to stay.
And partly also, I mean, as a business reality, Elizabeth, you know, flexibility. We have a profession in which 53% of practice holders are women, and 75% of trainees are women.
Yeah.
And it's not that men don't have babies, as it were. Men do have babies, and we do have to think about what parenthood means. And flexibility all round is going to be incredibly important.
Absolutely.
Irrespective of gender.
Yes.
And when it comes to delegation, this is a new skill set. This is a new way of being. And we are still feeling our way into it. There was an interesting article in the FT last week about this, sort of saying that we are still evolving. And Linda Grattan, who's written a book about redesigning work, she takes the view that she's a professor at, I think, the University of London. She's saying, well, I thought we'd be further along by now, but we're still in experimentation phase. We haven't reached the form of working. And actually, I see it becoming even more fragmented as we do work in different ways over time. It's a really good observation, Elizabeth. It does get harder, but this is where I think digital technology is going to come in, and you're going to start working on a project base. You know, you're not going to be trading emails. We're awash with emails, which I don't know about you, but I sent my first email in 1992 because I worked in a university at the time. And now email is our predominant format. We haven't thought about what that means for the way we work. We just do it. And it's not as thoughtful as a letter, is it?
No.
Just an asynchronous demands constantly. So we have to take control a bit more. We have to take a much more thoughtful approach, and that's very, very hard for law firms because you're a steamship that's underway, and it's very difficult to turn an established law firm. But thank you very much for the contribution, Elizabeth. It does create complexity, and I appreciate, particularly in private client, where you may feel that you need to be more office-based. It creates particular tension. And that's why people are moving more towards things like DocuSign and educating clients to use these things. And you might have heard of Fairwill, who were a startup who were entirely based online. They were an IT company with a legal face. They've struggled a little bit in the growth phase, but they'll do everything. They'll organise your funeral. They'll discharge all the responsibilities of probate, and they're particularly popular with people caring for people at a distance. But you know, that's happening. That's a disruptor, but you're going to be working on a sustainable basis. You'll be creating innovation that is sustaining the way that you work, but it's coming. That sustainable change. And thanks for the contribution. I can see a couple of things online. Lucy says, quick question on capability. My colleague is very senior secretary and have been doing things a long time, but still wants a lot of hand-holding and directing, which is frustrating when I know they don't actually need this. Is it worth talking through their anxieties or just accept how they want me to delegate? Tricky one to answer, Lucy, without knowing a bit more about the personality involved. I would feel that one out and just find out what it is they want. I think sometimes people want to come to work and do their transactional work, as it were, which I mean do the work in task-orientated way, in the way they've always done it, and not particularly interested in growth or expanding their horizons. And if you've got a colleague like that, and that's how they want to be, then I think you have to respect that. It's going to have implications for their career, but that's absolutely fine if that's how they want to be. They'll have immense value, I'm sure, knowing so much about your business and also about your clients. Really valued gatekeeper, I'm sure. So figuring out where that person fits in your team best and where their preferences lie, that's important. And then working with that, but doing it in a way that's mutually understood, so that there isn't a sense that somebody feels that things are happening behind their back. And that's about being in the adult space. That's about having adult to adult conversations. So you don't become, to use the psychology terminology, you don't become the critical parent saying, well, you're not doing this, and so I can't give it to you. You actually say, hang on a minute, I noticed this is what's happening for you. And as one adult to another adult, I'm saying, is this the way you want things to be? Very often we mistake, if we're not experienced in that way, we mistake that telling mindset for engagement, and it's not engagement. It's important to meet people as adults and invite them to do the same. Janine says, with respect, I'm disabled and my employer provides me with the ability to work full-time from home. Yeah, it's not a nice, it's a need. Yeah, absolutely. I totally accept that, and I think it's an inclusive medium, and it's one that we have to work hard at making work for everyone. And I think that's a classic message about inclusion, isn't it? It's not about saying, well, okay, you can work from home, so you make it work. It's about saying, well, you're going to work from home, so how do we make it work? And that's a different conversation. Have I missed anything? Amber, you were going to say something.
The question is in the chat, and also Janine's commented on it.
Okay. Issue about resources, too many solicitors delegating work, and as an NQ, yours goes to the bottom of the pile. I then don't want to follow up too much because I know they're under pressure. Okay, too many solicitors. Well, my question to you there, Amber, is with whom do you have that conversation? Because it's kind of above your pay grade, right, to sort out these people's workload. And at the same time, if you're noticing something that other people are not noticing, then that's valuable, important. And then at least you can sense check what the mood is there about that. And if it's a convenient reality that people are under pressure, then you're going to have to take a view of that. And that's a manifestation of culture. It comes back to how we do things around here. And if what we do around here is we put people at the bottom of the pile under immense pressure, it's worth noticing for your own purposes, and navigating that. And then I think that the next question that you ask of your senior colleague who has responsibility for this is, well, what is it that you expect me to do? How can I obtain the resource in a way that respects my colleagues' work effort? Because that's the question, isn't it? In practical terms, I'm sure you are regarded very positively, and it will be noticed by your more junior colleagues that you are circumspect about overloading them, that you're taking care of them. I suspect that will pay off for you. And the other thing is to know when you really need the help. So knowing when you really need the help and asking someone in terms for that help is important. If you don't really need the help and you've got a scarce resource, then you might want to save up your credit for the time when you really need it, and they know you're asking because you've got to. But that's not a great way to work routinely, is it? Because you want to have your own established work pattern, you want your own work to be sustainable, and that has an impact for other people. Have I missed anything, Martin? Is there anything else out there that in chat or elsewhere? Has anybody got any other questions?
That seems to be all the questions in the chat, and I'm not seeing anyone else putting their camera on or doing the virtual raise their hands point. So
okay.
It's 1:29 as well. So it seems like it would be a good point to thank you very much, Nicola, for your time, and to Hannah Opie for organising this as part of the Supporting Surrey initiative. You can sign up for other Supporting Surrey events and other Surrey Law Society events on Surrey Law Society's websites. And so I appreciate everyone for your time and wish you all a good day.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for your time and thoughts. It's been really lovely chatting with you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Amber. Thanks, Elizabeth. Cheers.